Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that heaven has already spoken about your next season and it called it rich? Not rich in the way the world defines it, with overflowing accounts or endless applause, but rich in depth, in purpose, in presence. What if God is not just preparing a blessing for you, but preparing you to carry a blessing that changes everything? This is not a promise for the distant future, this is an announcement. God said you're entering a rich season, and everything is about to shift. Just as the earth is governed by rhythms and seasons, winter, spring, summer, and autumn, so too is the human soul moved by an invisible order, a divine cadence set in motion by the Creator. The idea that life unfolds in seasons is not poetic metaphor alone, it is the very architecture of reality. One does not leap from seed to fruit overnight. There is a time to be hidden in the soil, a time to break open, a time to stretch upward, and a time to bear fruit. To be told that we are entering a rich season is not a statement about mere coincidence or favorable outcomes. It is a divine declaration, one that presupposes a sequence of sacred processes. It speaks of something prepared long before we became aware of it. The richness of a season is not simply in its yield, but in the quiet unfolding of its order. God has always revealed himself in patterns. He created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, not because he needed rest, but because he was engraving into creation the rhythm of work and stillness. The Israelites were led through wilderness before they entered promise. Even Christ spent 30 years in obscurity before 3 years of ministry. These are not arbitrary delays, they are intentional seasons. So when one hears that a rich season is approaching, it is not to be mistaken for a shortcut or a sudden shift, but rather the next appointed phase in an ongoing journey of grace. Nature, though without speech, proclaims this truth. The tree does not tremble in winter. It is not anxious when its leaves fall away. It does not curse the snow that smothers its roots. It stands bare and unashamed, knowing deep within that its leafless form is not death, but preparation. The sap still runs, the life is still present. It waits, and in due time, always in due time, the thaw comes, and the buds return. Likewise, the soul must learn not to despise the waiting or misinterpret the silence of God as absence. For every soul there comes a time when it must be stripped of all it thought was necessary, only to discover that it was being made ready to receive what truly matters. A rich season, then, is not defined merely by external abundance, but by alignment with God's timing. It is when the inner life and the outer circumstance begin to sing in harmony. It may include provision, opportunity, healing, or visible blessing, but these are the fruit, not the root. The root is trust. The root is obedience. The root is a surrendered heart that has allowed itself to be led through leaner times without forfeiting its hope. There are many who wish to live in perpetual summer, to skip the necessary rhythm of sowing, resting, and pruning. But perpetual summer brings drought. It is the cycle that brings life. It is the patience of spring, the labor of summer, the gathering of autumn, and even the seeming dormancy of winter that together make a rich season possible. None can be skipped. Each holds its sacred necessity. What is striking is that God calls these seasons forth by His word, not by our efforts. The soil does not command the rain. The flower does not coax the sun to rise. So too, when God declares that you are entering a rich season, it is not a compliment for your cleverness or a reward for your striving. It is a movement of grace, something you could not have arranged, but for which you were prepared. You may look back and see a trail of prayers, fastings, tears, late-night questions, and silent hopes, and you will realize that none of it was wasted. All was seed. And now the time of fruit is near. To understand the sacred rhythm of seasons is to live without despair in winter and without arrogance in harvest. It is to live with a heart tuned not to circumstance, but to the voice of the one who commands the seasons. When he says now, the season changes not always overnight, but surely, silently, faithfully. And the soul that understands this rhythm will not panic in the frost, nor boast in the bloom. It will abide rooted, steady, waiting for the richness that comes not from man, but from the hand of God. When we speak of God's voice, it is tempting to imagine it as thunder on a mountaintop, as lightning etched into the sky, or as a mighty wind that shakes the foundations of our lives. And while Scripture contains such dramatic episodes, Moses on Sinai, Elijah on Horeb, Saul on the road to Damascus, these moments are not the norm. More often, God speaks in ways that escape the notice of a hurried mind or a noisy soul. His voice is like the rustling of leaves in a quiet forest, or the hush that falls over the earth just before dawn. It does not demand attention, it invites stillness. And yet once it is heard, it becomes more real, more certain, than any noise the world could offer. When one hears the phrase, "God said you are entering a rich season," there is no trumpet sounding in the background. There is no scroll unfurling in the sky with divine handwriting across the clouds. More often it is a quiet conviction, arising like a spring of water from deep within. It is not loud, but it is weighty. It rests on the heart like a soft hand on the shoulder, assuring, grounding, yet unmistakably not of one's own making. There is a difference between wishful thinking and a divine assurance, though both can feel similar at first. The former is fragile, often tied to circumstance and mood. The latter is resilient. It can withstand delay, opposition, and even silence, because it was not born from the emotions but planted by the Spirit. God speaks in a way that respects human freedom while never abandoning divine sovereignty. He woos rather than forces. He calls rather than commands. The subtlety of his voice is not a weakness, but a mark of his character. It is easy to miss if one is inattentive, but impossible to forget once heard. This is the paradox. Though his voice is quiet, it often carries with it an authority that drowns out the louder voices of doubt, fear, and distraction. To say God said is not to boast in having heard an audible word, but rather to confess a deep inner certainty. It is the kind of knowledge that goes beyond explanation. One could not diagram it or prove it empirically, and yet it compels action, steadies the soul, and marks the turning of an unseen page in the book of one's life. The soul knows what the mind cannot explain, and if the soul has truly heard God, then no contradiction or delay can unseat that knowing. Of course, this subtle voice is not without precedent. It aligns with the wisdom of Scripture, the fruit of the Spirit, and the broader counsel of God's revealed character. A man may claim God has spoken to him, but if that word is selfish, cruel, impatient, or rooted in pride, then it is not the voice of God, it is the echo of his own desires. The voice of God, even when it calls one into blessing, always brings with it a sense of humility and mission. It never flatters. It never feeds the ego. It strengthens the soul but weakens the flesh. It calls us into more, but never at the expense of others. And it always draws us closer to the heart of Christ. To enter a rich season, then, begins with hearing, or rather, perceiving that God has declared it. This awareness does not always arrive with a timeline or a set of instructions. It is often a holy invitation to trust. It may come after a long night of prayer, or in the middle of ordinary life, a line in a sermon, a verse read for the 100th time, or a whisper in the dark that simply says, "It's time." And though nothing around you may look different in that moment, everything within you shifts. The landscape of your soul changes. What was once heavy becomes light. What was once uncertain becomes clear. The waiting is not over, but it is now filled with expectation instead of dread. You begin to walk differently, not faster or louder, but with more peace, more attention, more assurance. God's voice is the beginning of every true season. Before the world began, he said, "Let there be," and light answered. So too, when he says, "It is your time," the season begins to move toward you, as if creation itself recognizes the sound. You do not need to push or prove. You only need to believe that what was whispered in secret will be fulfilled in the open. The rich season begins not when the fruit appears on the branch, but when God speaks the word into your spirit, and you, with trembling certainty, believe it. Richness, as understood by heaven, is vastly different from the glittering images the world conjures when it hears the word. Earthly measures of wealth speak in terms of accumulation of gold stored in vaults, land spread across maps, and names etched in legacy. But such wealth is fragile, subject to rust, theft, and the slow erosion of time. Kingdoms built on silver fall like leaves in autumn. Fortunes fade, names are forgotten, and empires collapse under the weight of their own pride. Yet the richness spoken of when God declares a rich season is not one of temporary excess, but of eternal value measured not by weight or number, but by the quality of what cannot be touched and yet transforms everything it touches. God measures richness on a different scale entirely. He does not count coins but character. He does not weigh possessions but peace. The richest man in the eyes of God may own little, but walk with a soul entirely at rest. The woman favored in a rich season may have no audience applauding her, but she carries a joy that cannot be shaken, a love that cannot be bought, and a hope that lives even when all else seems to die. These are not riches the world recognizes, but heaven knows them well. They are eternal. They last when all else passes away. To say you are entering a rich season, therefore, is not to suggest that God is merely increasing your comfort. It is far more profound. It means He is drawing you deeper into His abundance, which may well include provision, healing, or visible blessings, but always begins with the transformation of the inner life. True richness flows from the inside out. It starts when the soul becomes rooted in things that cannot be lost, things like wisdom, compassion, gratitude, discernment, and above all, communion with God Himself. There is no season richer than one where you walk in step with your Creator, even if the external signs do not dazzle others. This kind of richness is subtle. It does not demand to be seen, and yet it radiates from a person like light from a lamp. You can feel it in those who have it. There is a steadiness in them, a kindness not hurried by ambition, a patience not weakened by delays. They do not boast, but they carry a quiet authority. Their words may be few, but they land with weight. Their laughter is clean, and their sorrows, though deep, do not drown them. Such richness is not the fruit of chance or luck. It is the reward of divine work done in secret places, of prayers prayed in the dark, of tears that watered sacred ground, of surrender when the cost felt too high. It is easy to be deceived by surface-level abundance. The world will point to success, prosperity, and fame and call it a rich life. But the soul knows better. There are those who appear to have everything yet live in constant dread of losing it. Their hands are full, but their hearts are empty. They eat well but sleep poorly. Their calendars are full, but their minds are restless. This is not richness. This is a performance, a facade. God, in His mercy, often delays certain blessings so that we might be strong enough to carry them without being crushed by them. For the richness He gives is not meant to be a burden, but a gift that enlarges the soul. When God leads you into a rich season, it will often be preceded by a refining one. He removes the idols you once trusted, the false riches you once chased. And then, in the quiet aftermath, He begins to rebuild not with gold or silver, but with truth and love. You begin to see differently. What once seemed desirable now looks hollow. What once felt small now feels sacred. You begin to long not for more things, but for more of Him. And in that longing you find the truest riches of all. This richness cannot be taken. It does not depend on economy's applause or circumstances. It lives in the one who knows they are loved by God and lives from that love. It manifests in every area touched by that awareness, relationships, decisions, work, worship. You carry it not like a trophy, but like a quiet flame. It lights your path, and it warms others who draw near. This is the richness God gives, not just the riches of having, but the fullness of becoming. Before any field can yield a harvest, it must first be disturbed. The ground, so quiet and undisturbed through the long months of cold or drought, must be broken open. It is not a gentle process. The plough does not caress the soil, it tears through it, slicing open the hardened earth, overturning what lies hidden beneath the surface. To the untrained eye, it might look like destruction. But the farmer knows that this violence is mercy, that the breaking is not an end but a beginning. So it is with the soul. There is no rich season without preparation. There is no abundance that does not come through some prior sowing, some quiet submission, some holy discomfort. God in his wisdom does not lead his children into blessing before they are ready to hold it. To do so would be cruel. For what is unearned is often unappreciated, and what is received without shaping often becomes a burden rather than a gift. We are not born with hands that know how to carry glory. We are taught, trained, refined often in hiddenness, often through pain. Many people long for the rich season but resist the necessary preparation. They want the fruit without the root, the harvest without the sowing. But the soil of the soul must be tilled. Pride must be uprooted, shallow motives exposed, and false securities shaken. This can feel like loss. It can feel like silence. One prays and hears nothing. One obeys and sees no reward. One gives and feels no return. Yet all the while the gardener is at work, not neglecting but preparing, not punishing but protecting. He knows that if the blessing comes too soon, it will ruin rather than restore. There are times when God strips away every comfort not to harm, but to deepen. The absence of ease is not the absence of God. In fact, it is often in the quiet, unglamorous days of endurance that he is nearest though hidden. The soul is stretched in silence. It is in the seasons of apparent stillness that trust is tested, and trust, once tested, becomes the foundation upon which a rich life can be built. One learns to pray not for escape, but for endurance. One begins to see the value of waiting, not passive waiting, but attentive, faithful expectation. The kind of waiting that keeps the lamp burning through the night, not knowing when the bridegroom will come, but certain that he will. Those who have gone through such preparation emerge different. They do not speak carelessly of blessing because they have learned what it costs. They carry their abundance not as a prize, but as a responsibility. They remember the lean days, the days when manna was barely enough, and they carry compassion for others still walking through them. The prepared heart does not hoard. It understands that the harvest was never meant to be eaten alone. Sometimes the preparation looks like disappointment. The dream is delayed, the door does not open, the opportunity slips through one's fingers. It may feel like failure. But God is not bound to human timelines. He is not hurried by our frustration or confused by our impatience. The blessing may be delayed because the one receiving it is still being refined, not as punishment but as preservation. The deeper the well, the more water it can hold. God digs deep before he fills. The rich season cannot be rushed, and neither can the preparation that precedes it. One might try to imitate fruitfulness, to manufacture success or replicate the outcomes of others. But imitation without preparation is fragile. It cannot last. What God builds in secret has weight. It endures storms. It carries life not just for the one who receives, but for many others. True preparation makes room for others. It expands the heart to serve, to give, to love without calculation. It is in the quiet trenches of discipline, surrender, and humility that God fashions vessels of honor. He hides his greatest work from the applause of men. The roots grow in darkness, unseen and uncelebrated. Yet they are the reason the tree will not fall when the wind comes. The hidden years are not wasted. They are sacred. And when the season shifts and the fruit begins to appear, it will not be by accident, but by divine design. It will be the result of long labor, not just yours but his. The one who prepares is faithful. The one who breaks the ground is the same who fills it with rain. And the one who endures the preparation will be able to recognize the richness when it finally comes. There is a quiet deception that creeps into the human heart, an idea that when blessings arrive, they will bring only ease. That when the long-awaited season of abundance begins, all struggle will end, and the soul will be carried forward by effortless joy. Yet this is not how heaven works. A rich season is not a vacation from responsibility. It is a call to deeper faithfulness. The blessing is real. The abundance is true, but so too is the weight that comes with it. The soul must be prepared not only to receive, but to carry. And what God gives is always more than enough to bless others, which means it must be stewarded with care. Abundance tests the heart as much as lack ever did, perhaps more so. In the wilderness, the dependence on God is clear. There is no illusion of self-sufficiency when manna falls from heaven and water springs from rocks. But in times of plenty, the temptation is subtle to believe one has earned it, to become careless, to forget the giver, and fixate on the gift. This is why God trains his people in the wilderness, so that when the rich season comes, their hearts remain tethered to the source. The blessing is never meant to replace the need for God, but to deepen the relationship with him. Responsibility grows with blessing. To receive more is to be entrusted with more. More influence means more accountability. More provision means more to manage wisely. More opportunity means greater discernment is needed. The soul that has walked with God through the dry and weary land learns that every gift is holy, not to be handled casually or consumed selfishly. The rich season is a call to rise, not to rest in comfort, but to rise into maturity, generosity, and purpose. One must be careful not to misunderstand the richness. It is not indulgence. It is not excess for the sake of pleasure. It is the right thing, at the right time, in the right measure, for the right purpose. It may come in the form of financial breakthrough, healing, restoration of relationships, or a new calling. Whatever the shape, it carries the same expectation that it will be used in alignment with God's intent. The blessing is a tool, not a trophy. It is meant to build, to serve, to heal, to give. When handled with humility, it becomes a means of extending the goodness of God beyond oneself. This is why the preparation is so important. Without it, the blessing becomes overwhelming, even dangerous. It is not uncommon for people to receive what they longed for and find themselves emptier than before. A heart unready for abundance will be consumed by it. But the one who has learned to live with open hands, who has trusted through lack and loved through silence, will be able to hold the gift without clinging to it. They will remember the days when they had only God, and it will shape how they steward what they now hold. The rich season often brings visibility, recognition, and favor. These things are not evil, but they are sharp tools. They can build or destroy depending on whose hands they rest in. God does not exalt lightly. He watches to see how one carries obscurity before he entrusts influence. The one who seeks his face in the shadows will be the one who does not lose him in the spotlight. For it is easy to appear faithful when life is hard. But in ease, in success, in the applause of others there, the soul's true allegiance is revealed. The rich season is not just a season of receiving, it is a season of proving. Not in the sense of performance, but in the sense of confirmation. It reveals what was formed in the hidden place. It shows the fruit of obedience, the depth of trust, the integrity of the vessel. And though the world may call it success, heaven watches for faithfulness. It is not how much one is given, but how it is held and used that determines the beauty of a rich season. So when abundance comes, it must be met with intentionality. With gratitude, yes, but also with wisdom, reverence, and care. The soul must remain small before God, even if life grows large before others. The hands must remain open, the heart soft, the ear attentive to the same still voice that led through the wilderness. For if the soul can carry the blessing without losing its dependence, then the rich season will not be fleeting. It will become a platform for even greater purpose, a space where heaven and earth meet in the life of one who remembers who the blessing came from and why it was given at all. Every season ordained by God carries not only a rhythm but a purpose. And the richness of a season is not found solely in what it gives to us, but in what it draws out of us, what it leads us to do with what we've received. A rich season is never meant to culminate in comfort. It is an invitation, a summons even, into deeper partnership with the heart of God. The blessing was never just for the blessed. It was meant to overflow. It was meant to move outward like ripples in still water, touching lives beyond the immediate circle of the one who first received. God is always thinking generationally, eternally, redemptively. What he gives is never isolated. When he pours out abundance, whether through wisdom, provision, opportunity, or healing, it is not a stopping point, it is a sending point. The richness is a resource. And with every resource comes responsibility. To step into a rich season is to be trusted with divine supply. And divine supply is always aimed at restoration, reconciliation, and redemption. The world teaches a cycle of accumulation. More for me means more success, more power, more comfort. But the kingdom teaches overflow. The cup runs over not for the sake of spillage, but for the sake of saturation. Those around you are meant to drink from the abundance that God has placed within your reach. A word spoken in season can revive the weary. A gift offered in love can change the trajectory of a life. A door opened for another can unlock their destiny. Richness becomes sacred when it moves beyond preservation into distribution. This kind of movement does not come naturally to the flesh. Human instinct often seeks to hold, protect, and secure, to store up for tomorrow, just in case. But kingdom abundance flows in the opposite direction. It multiplies in motion. Like the loaves and fishes, it increases in the giving. The moment we choose to release what God has entrusted to us, be it encouragement, wisdom, or provision, it ceases to be merely ours and becomes part of a greater miracle. God blesses those he can trust to be channels, not containers, to be rivers, not reservoirs. A rich season, then, is not only a time of receiving from God, but of becoming more like him. God is generous by nature. He gives without compulsion. He blesses beyond merit. He heals, he restores, and he builds. And when he draws someone into abundance, it is an act of alignment, an invitation to mirror that same generosity. The rich season is not just about fruit, it's about seed. What is given now can become the source of future harvests in others' lives, if only we recognize the purpose within the provision. And there is wisdom needed in the outpouring. Not every opportunity to give will appear holy at first glance. Not every request is divine. But the Spirit within teaches the rhythm when to give, where to give, how to give. And he does not teach through guilt, but through conviction. The one who listens carefully in the rich season will hear the quiet prompting of heaven. This person needs a word. That door needs to be opened. This project needs your strength. This moment needs your silence. The richness will stretch you, not with pressure, but with possibility. In that way, the rich season becomes sacred ground, a place not of indulgence, but of intersection between God and others. It is where prayers are answered not directly, but through willing vessels. It is where healing flows through ordinary hands, and provision moves through unexpected generosity. Those who walk through their rich season with open eyes and hearts, tuned to heaven, will find themselves in the center of divine appointments. And there is no joy like knowing you have been used by God, not manipulated, not exhausted, but faithfully placed in the right moment, with the right gift, for the right reason. The rich season is a chapter in the larger story of redemption. It is not a reward, though it may feel like one. It is not a pause in life's labor, though it may bring rest. It is a holy intersection where God entrusts his abundance, not simply to comfort his people, but to commission them, to feed the hungry, to heal the broken, to encourage the weary, to stand in the gap, to speak life into dry places. And all of it, every act of giving, every moment of pouring out, is rooted in the quiet recognition that the richness was never just for you. It was entrusted to you, so it could flow through you for the glory of the one who gave it. So then, as we stand on the threshold of what God calls a rich season, let us not mistake its meaning. It is not merely a time of gain, but of growth, not just a moment of favor, but of formation. The richness God brings is not hollow or fleeting, it is weighty with purpose, rooted in heaven's values, and shaped by eternal hands. It calls us to remember who we are, who He is, and why we have been entrusted with more. To walk into a rich season is not to be elevated for the sake of our own glory, but to be positioned for impact, refined for stewardship, and awakened to a life of deeper surrender and divine usefulness. The invitation is clear: receive with humility, carry with reverence, and give with joy. For the richness of God is not found in how much we gather, but in how much we reflect Him when the abundance comes.